It is with joy that we welcome you to Advent Hope Animation, a ministry dedicated to bringing the Advent message to life through the power of animation. Through the inspired writings of Ellen White, we seek to share the visions, counsels, and warnings given by the Lord to prepare His people for the soon return of our Saviour. Throughout history, God has used various means to proclaim His truth, through the spoken word, the written page, and now through visual storytelling. If your heart is stirred to grow in faith and understanding, we invite you to subscribe and join us on this sacred journey. The wise men directed their course where the star seemed to lead them. And as they drew nigh to the city of Jerusalem, the star was enshrouded in darkness and no longer guided them. They reasoned that the Jews could not be ignorant of the great event of the advent of the Messiah, and they made inquiries in the vicinity of Jerusalem. The wise men are surprised to see no unusual interest upon the subject of the coming of the Messiah. They fear that after all they may not have read the prophecies correctly. Uncertainty beclouds their minds, and they become anxious. They hear the priests repeating and enforcing their traditions, and expounding the law, and exalting their religion and their own piety. They point to their phylacteries and the borders of their garments, upon which the precepts of the law and their traditions are inscribed, as evidences of their devotion, while they denounce the Romans and the Greeks as heathen and sinners above all men. The wise men leave Jerusalem not as confident and hopeful as when they entered it. They marvel that the Jews are not interested and joyful in prospect of this great event of the advent of Christ. The wise men plainly stated their errand. They were in search of Jesus, the King of the Jews, for they had seen his star in the east and had come to worship him. The city of Jerusalem was thrown into great excitement by the sayings of the wise men. The news was immediately carried to Herod. He was exceedingly troubled, yet disguised the discomfiture and received the men with apparent courtesy. The advent of Christ was the greatest event which had taken place since the creation of the world. The birth of Christ, which gave joy to the angels of heaven, was not welcome to the kingly powers of the world. Suspicion and envy were aroused in King Herod, and his wicked heart was planning his dark purposes for the future. The Jews manifested a stupid indifference to the story of the wise men. But Herod is intensely interested and excited. He summons the scribes and the chief priests and urges upon them to search carefully prophetic history and tell him where the infant king was to be born. The careless indifference and apparent ignorance of the scribes and chief priests, as they turn to their books for the words of prophecy, irritate the fully aroused king. He thinks they are trying to conceal from him the real facts in regard to the birth of the Messiah. He authoritatively commands them to make close search in relation to their expected king. Now pride and envy close the door against the light. If the reports brought by the shepherds and the wise men were credited, they would place the priests and rabbis in a most unenviable position, disproving their claim to be the exponents of the truth of God. These learned teachers would not stoop to be instructed by those whom they termed heathen. It could not be, they said, that God had passed them by to communicate with ignorant shepherds or uncircumcised Gentiles. They determined to show their contempt for the reports that were exciting King Herod and all Jerusalem. They would not even go to Bethlehem to see whether these things were so. And they led the people to regard the interest in Jesus as a fanatical excitement. Here began the rejection of Christ by the priests and rabbis. From this point, their pride and stubbornness grew into a settled hatred of the Saviour. While God was opening the door to the Gentiles, the Jewish leaders were closing the door to themselves. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. Although Herod received the wise men with apparent respect, yet the intimation by them of the birth of a king to reign in Jerusalem excited his envy and hatred against the infant whom he thought might prove his rival and drive him or his descendants from the throne. A storm of opposition and satanic fury took possession of Herod, and he determined to destroy this infant king. Yet he put on a calm exterior and requested a private interview with the wise men. He then inquired particularly the exact time the star appeared. He apparently hailed the supposition of the birth of Christ with joy, expressing a desire to be immediately informed by the wise men, that he might be among the first to show him true honour by worshipping him also. The wise men were not able to read the heart of the tyrant Herod, but God, who was acquainted with every emotion of the soul, with the intents and purposes of the heart, was not deceived by his hypocritical pretences. His power will protect and preserve the precious infant Saviour from Satan's devices until his mission on earth is accomplished. After the wise men had left Jerusalem, they again saw, to their great joy, the guiding star in the heavens, which directed them to the birthplace of our Saviour. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. The wise men found no loyal guard to debar their entrance to the presence of Christ. The honourable of the world are not in attendance. In place of the people who should have welcomed with grateful homage the Prince of Life, he is surrounded with dumb beasts. After the mission of the wise men had been accomplished, they were purposing to return and bear the joyful news to Herod of the success of their journey. But God sent his angel in the night season to turn the course of the wise men. In a vision of the night, they were plainly told not to return to Herod. They obeyed the heavenly vision, and being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt. God well knew that the advent of his Son to earth would stir the powers of darkness. Satan did not want that light should come into the world. The eye of God was upon his Son every moment. The Lord provided a way for Joseph to preserve his own life, and the life of Jesus, and that of the mother, by their fleeing into Egypt. He provided for the necessities of their journey, and for their sojourn in Egypt, by moving upon the wise men of the East to go in search of the infant Saviour, and to bear him valuable offerings as a token of honour. The Lord is acquainted with the hearts of all men. He directed the course of Joseph into Egypt, that he might there find an asylum from the wrath of a tyrannical king, and the life of the infant Saviour be preserved. The earthly parents of Jesus were poor. The gifts brought to them by the wise men sustained them while in the land of strangers. Herod waited anxiously for the return of the wise men, for he was impatient to carry out his determined purpose to destroy the infant king of Israel. After he had waited long for the knowledge he desired, he feared his purpose might be thwarted. He reasoned thus: could those men have read the dark deed he premeditated? Could they have understood his design and purposely avoided him? This, he thought, was insult and mockery. His impatience, envy, and hatred increased. He was stirred by his father, the devil, to seek the accomplishment of his purpose by a most cruel act. If he should fail in carrying out his murderous intent by pretense and subtlety, he would, by power and authority, strike terror to the hearts of all the Jews. They should have an example of what their king would meet, should they seek to place one upon the throne in Jerusalem. Herod issued a proclamation to a large body of soldiers, whose hearts were hardened by crime, war, and bloodshed, to go throughout Bethlehem and all the coasts thereof, and massacre all the children from 2 years old and under. Herod designed in this cruel act to accomplish a double purpose. First, to exercise by this bold act his power and authority over the Jews, and, second, to silence their proud boastings in regard to their king, and also make his own kingdom secure by murdering the infant prince whom he envied and feared. This cruel work was accomplished. The sword of unfeeling soldiers carried destruction everywhere. The horror and distress of parents were beyond description. The wailing cries of bereaved mothers, as they clasped their expiring infants to their breasts, rose above the coarse jests and imprecations of the soldiers, while they cried to heaven for vengeance on the tyrant king. But Herod did not long survive his cruel work. He died a fearful death. He was compelled to yield to a power he could not turn aside or overcome. After Herod was cut off from the earth, the angel again warned Joseph to return to the land of Israel. He was desirous to make his home in Judah or Bethlehem. But when he heard that the son of the tyrannical Herod reigned upon his father's throne, he was afraid that the purposes of the Father might be carried out by the Son in murdering Christ. While in his perplexity, not knowing where to locate, the Lord, through his angel, again selected for him a place of safety. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. This was the reception the Saviour met as he came to a fallen world. He left his heavenly home, his majesty and riches and high command, and took upon himself man's nature, that he might save the fallen race. Instead of men glorifying God for the honour he had conferred upon them in thus sending his Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, by giving him a place in their affections, there seemed to be no rest, nor safety for the infant Saviour. Jehovah could not trust to the inhabitants of the world his Son, who came into the world that through his divine power he might redeem fallen man. He who came to bring life to man met, from the very ones he came to benefit, insult, hatred, and abuse. God could not trust his beloved Son with men while carrying on his benevolent work for their salvation and final exaltation to his own throne. He sent angels to attend his Son and preserve his life till his mission on earth should be accomplished, and he should die by the hands of the very men he came to save.